rests. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Many of us as children, and even children today, one of the things that put a smile on our faces at Christmas time was when we would watch the recounting of Dr. Seuss's great story, How the Grinch Stole Christmas. And we all remember the story. Maybe we just watched the story. But it's the story of this nefarious character, the Grinch, who decides that he can't stand the joy and the happiness of the Whos who live in Whoville, that once a year on December the 25th, they bring out all the trappings of Christmas, and they celebrate, and they smile, and they laugh, and they sing, and it drives the Grinch crazy. So one night he decides, the night before Christmas, to sneak into the town under the cloak of darkness, to steal all of the trappings of Christmas, and to wait for Christmas morning, to hear the cries and the wails, and to see the tears of the Whos down in Whoville, who without all the trappings of Christmas would certainly be heartbroken. But the story goes on to say that in the morning, as the Grinch listens, he doesn't hear cries, he doesn't hear wails, he doesn't see tears, he hears singing, the sound of beautiful, peaceful, sweet singing of the Whos down in Whoville. And as Dr. Seuss says much better, but the sound wasn't sad, why this sound sounded glad. Every Who down in Whoville, the tall and the small, was singing without any presents at all. He hadn't stopped Christmas from coming. It came. Somehow or other, it came just the same. It came without ribbons, it came without tags, it came without packages, boxes, or bags. He puzzled and puzzled till his puzzler was sore. Then the Grinch thought of something he hadn't thought of before. Maybe Christmas, he thought, doesn't come from a store. Maybe Christmas, perhaps, means a little bit more. I think all of us on this Christmas day, 2020, all of us need something to put a smile on our face, and all of us need to remember again the more of Christmas. You know, we've all gone through and continue to live through a very, very difficult year. This pandemic that's caused so much death and pain and suffering, so much isolation, so much aloneness, covers all of us. We lived through a year of tremendous wrenching protests where our brothers and sisters have rose up and asked for a better world, a more fair world, and named the sin of racism. We've lived during a year of a contentious election where there has appeared and been uncovered so much division and mistrust, one for another, that continues to be an open wound. Yes, I think at the end of this year, at this moment of Christmas, we all need to find a reason to smile, and we all need to explore together the more of Christmas. We just listened to that story, the birth story of Jesus. And again, put yourself in that story, as we always do each year. But the birth of Jesus happens in a world just as unsettled as ours, just as tumultuous, just as broken, just as wounded. Jesus is born in a world of military conquest and oppression. And the very moment where Jesus' parents would want a comfortable and calm birth, the powers that be upend their life, throw them into the darkness, force them to move and to go to Joseph's homeland. And in that place where they might have sought another level of comfort for the birth of Jesus, what do they find? But no welcome at all. Inhospitality, even cruelty, to decide to throw out a young pregnant girl into the night. Good luck having the birth. And yet, that birth happened. That birth happened. In that dark, lonely, on the margins of the planet, that birth of Jesus happened. And God, the magnificence of God, our Creator, in order to double down on the message, invites the first to hear the message, The first to be welcomed into that community were not the well-connected and the well-thought of, but rather the despised, the outcast, the dirty, the shepherds. As if to ensure that everyone knew they were invited, God started with the ones least likely to be invited to this community. And in that moment, brothers and sisters, we see the more of Christmas, that God proclaims this is salvation. This place which no one would imagine, where everything seemed to have gone wrong, this is in fact where the story of salvation begins. All are welcome. All can find their way to this place. You know, for 50 years, this beautiful Mass on Sunday has gathered a virtual community, right? And many of you have been here week after week for long periods of time. You know, this community that's been formed in many ways on the margins of the world, maybe a community that most people don't even notice. You know, it's made up of you who is in a nursing home, you who are in a hospital, you who are in a prison, you who are in a refugee camp, you who are in a rehabilitation center or a psychiatric facility, you who are in the military, you who perhaps are in a homeless shelter. You've always been invited and found your way to this virtual community. But one of the things that happens this year because of this pandemic is so many others will also join us today. You know, others, the young and strong, mothers and fathers and children who can't make their way to the traditional church. You're with us today. You're part of this community now. And so maybe look around this virtual church in your mind's eye. See your brother or sister throughout the world, of every race, of every way of life, of every struggle. See them. They're here with you. It's the beginning of understanding the more of Christmas. It's beginning to understand the very dream of God, which begins in a stable with a frightened couple and a bunch of nobodies, the shepherds. It's the beginning of God's dream. So brothers and sisters, as we celebrate this most unusual Christmas, wherever you are, wherever you find yourself, the challenge of Christmas is that our heart, in fact, expands. Isn't that the dream of God? Isn't that what salvation looks like? That more and more of our brothers and sisters can find their way into our hearts. That our hearts, in fact, grow. We recognize who we are. We recognize the great task before us to build a better world. That, in fact, is the more of Christmas. Even the Grinch himself, as Dr. Seuss reminded us, after he sees this wonderful miracle in Whoville, he says, and then what happened? Well, in Whoville, they say that the Grinch's small heart grew 3 sizes that day. And then the true meaning of Christmas came through on that bright morning light, now that his heart didn't feel quite so tight. So may we celebrate today this Christmas. May we find a reason to put a smile on our face, and may our hearts be touched by that child Jesus, by that first story, and may our hearts grow wherever we find ourselves, that they find room for all of our sisters and brothers throughout the world, and that we, in fact, dream with the God who creates, who saves, and sustains us.